Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor, and I am now quite small, at least when compared to other times, because I once again have a special guest. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Armanis Ar-Feinial, and I write a lot of books and like to go to Japan every now and again.
Ooh, fancy.
Mm.
Okay. Now these interview questions are picked out to be somewhat somewhat broad and could touch upon a lot of
Mm.
a lot of topics. So before we start, is there anything that you would rather avoid discussing over the course of this interview?
Politics.
Yeah.
uh, Other than that, I'm pretty open.
Okay. Well then, you say you said you've written a whole bunch of books. So what can you tell me about the about your general fare? What is it that you're typically interested in?
In terms of writing, um, I've always thoroughly enjoyed the fantastical worlds. Most of my work usually has some DNA derived from Middle Earth in some way, shape, or form. Um, but I also like very morally gray characters, so you might generally find me putting in Game of Thrones s type characters into like Middle Earth, and that's kind of like what you're following, because that's what I like to read. Also, is the morally complex characters. You're not always following the good guys, and oftentimes the good guys usually die very early. So I've enjoyed. I haven't read Warhammer 40K, but I have read Warhammer pre 40K, and so that has been very, very enjoyable to read because it is that kind of world. It's very fantastical, but you're still following these very broken people.
Scratches that same itch, so to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It scratches that same edge. Yeah.
Do you have do you have primarily novels or primarily short form fiction in your bibliography?
A lot of it is short form novellas. I have a series of omnibuses called "The Dawn of Forest Black," and so the first omnibus is like the first two novels that kind of picks it up, and then the rest of the omnibuses consist of novellas, usually under 30,000 words. Some of them are even shorter than that, about 10 to 15,000 words. And many of those, even though it's set within like the same time frame as like the novels a little bit after, um, they're very self-contained most of the time. So you could pick up like story three without reading the first two novels, and like it really wouldn't matter. Like you might have other characters kind of making like a little bit of an appearance here and there, but they don't have much to do with the actual story that you're looking at. I do have um, two novels that are full length, about between like 70 to 100,000 words, that are more, I want to say, human, because they it takes place in the modern era, and I unfortunately have the habit of understanding world events, and I unintentionally predicted the Ukraine and Russian war in the books, and I did not mean to become the modern Nostradamus, but here we are. Um, and so that one is not, there is some magic in it, but it's very, very low. So it's urban fantasy. I like to call it just like, realistic fiction with drops of magic here and there.
I have some comments about Nostradamus and his, and his methods of predicting, but that's but that's a separate topic, not, not really worth delving into. It might be worth delving into if we're going on a broader topic on how mysticism interacts with interacts with the political. But you've already said that you don't want to discuss politics, so I'm not touching that. Not on this occasion, at least.
Yeah, I
Now,
appreciate that.
um, Now, you've already said that you are primarily you know, not necessarily short story, but a short form writer, primarily looking at
Mm.
novellas. Uh, what is it that you are, what is it that comes to you first when you are writing your stories? Uh, so what is that? So what is like, what typically is that first flash that comes to you that makes you go, oh, this is something I want to build upon?
Yeah, so it's either, I mean, you kind of like have that meme, right? That went around a little bit and says like, "Hey, yeah, I just want to get to that scene that I vividly remember during this song that I was listening to while I was drunk or tripping off of acid and mushrooms." And so while I'm not tripping on acid or mushrooms, I do have that snippet of, oh, here's a rough idea. Um, and then like I'll like think about it and whether or not that's something I'm gonna like pursue and try to create a story from that. Um, but when I do decide that I'm going to make a story out of it, I'll go onto like my desktop, pull out a Word document, and then I'll start like drafting, like putting in the notes, kind of just like building the story or from like the ground ups. Who are the characters? What do I want them to represent or embody? What character traits do I want them to have to tell that type of story? Um, and before I actually get into the prose of it, I draft like a very detailed outline. So it's like chapter one, here's the cast list that needs to be in here. Here's the things that I need to have happen in this chapter, and this is the order that I want that to happen. And so I will, in true plotter fashion, treat my outline almost as like the Bible of the book. Is that I'm like writing based off of the outline that I've already put together. Um, I do deviate from my outline every once in a while. Um, and then I have to like scrap the outline for that segment of the book that I'm writing, and then like repurpose that section of the outline so that I still have some form of a roadmap based off of the new idea that came to my mind. Um, this actually happened in one instance where I was on a run. It was like I think I was like written about like 5,000 words that day, and I was like, all right, I know where I'm going, and I am going to go. I'm calling it a night. So I went into the shower and like put on like a very depressing playlist um, while I was in the shower. And so while I was in the shower, I was like orating um, what like the next steps of that manuscript was going to look like. And then I had realized that I had in the shower, my oration was deviating from what I had in the outline. But I liked the deviation so much more than what I had in the outline. So it's like, well, I can't stop now because I'm going to forget this. So I, you know, finish my shower, turn my computer back on, and then like revise the outline so that I could go on with the new train of thought. Um, so that's kind of where my ideas typically come from, or they might come from like games that I've seen or that I've played, where just like something inspires me to think of something or repurpose an idea that I kind of had. So I do have a new book coming out that was inspired by Jane Austen. Funny enough, um, but has absolutely nothing to do with Jane Austen. Um, and so I will again like take something that I've seen, repurpose that into an existing world that I already have, and then start writing into that.
Okay. It's nice. It's interesting to know that you mentioned the deviations from the from the outline, because the next two questions I have kind of focus on kind of focus on such deviations. The first one is is a matter of excluding something that you initially had in the outline, deleted scenes, as it were. Do you have do
Mm.
you have any of those that were particularly memorable that you would want to talk about or exemplify?
Mm. Yeah, I can kind of talk about one. So the magical mysticism from one of my longer novels has like it actually has an edition with the deleted scenes, and then in addition without them. Actually, like the first one's got the ones with the deleted scenes in it, and then I repurposed it and removed those scenes. Both are still available. But the reason I had done that is with some initial like feedback, it was very, very confusing for people who were just getting into it. So they didn't understand who, these characters were or why all of this seemed relevant to the main plot. And so after like percolating and constantly thinking about it, I was like, you know what? You're right. These characters don't necessarily need to be there to tell this story. So I went to the manuscript, I removed those scenes that were irrelevant to the main plot, and then, you know, republished it as just its own like self-contained story.
Okay. The next question is basically the opposite of that. So basically created scenes, aka there's you notice that your outline is perhaps a little bit incomplete, so you decide to uh, make an addition that you're not in, that you maybe aren't entirely pleased with at the start, but then you slot it in and then it works great. Do you have any such instance?
Yeah. Actually, yes. Funny enough. So, let's
There
see
is
what.
that shower story you told a little bit earlier, but aside from that.
Oh yeah, that one. Oh, that one wasn't like an added scene. That was just like a change scene. But I do have something that's a little bit closer to what you're talking about. That's a couple years ago. I put together an anthology, and one of my stories was in there, and it strictly told the story of a teenager trying to save her young daughter from a child marriage. And it's strictly focused on her perspective within the story. Um, what it meant from her, what were the risks that she had to take in order to attempt to save her sister. So I'm not going to go into like many of the nitty gritty details because like that is again that is still available in again in the anthology. Um, Now, again, based off of feedback, it was the exact opposite. People felt like, oh, well, this doesn't feel like it's like again, it was a novella. It wasn't a full length novel. And so I went back and, all right, there are these characters. Let me explain why these things are happening the way that they're happening. And so I decided to expand upon that and commit the cardinal sin of having a novella that has a couple of moving parts to it. So with a novella, like you really want to keep things tight and you really want to try to limit things to one POV. And I didn't do that with this one. Um, this one I added like here's the perspective of the antagonist, of the person who is causing the problem in the first place. And to try and it's like okay, yeah, like he might not be a great person, but at least you kind of understand why he's doing it and why he's so desperate to do things this way. um, and then you have a couple of like murderers like around there. So you kind of just like expanding on the beginning as like the set of a for a volleyball spike. So and those scenes have been added, right? So those additional chapters have been added for this again. Like it's much longer than it was, but it's still novella length. Um,
And it serves its purpose, I assume.
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think it does. When somebody reads it, it's just like, what is this? I don't understand. Why would you include all of this in here? Um, yeah, I think it serves its purpose in the beginning. Um, I think there it serves with enough foreshadowing for what is to come after. Again, like leading up to all of the things that happen within the form of resolution that does take place at the end.
Okay. Now, we talked a lot about the actual writing, about writing process so far. But when it comes to the actual like elements of writing, what is it that you find most enjoyable to write? What is it you find least enjoyable to write?
Let's see. Um, I want to say the most enjoyable part to write is the characters. Like their dialogue, their mannerisms, trying to figure out how they would react to certain things, their body language, and how it would depict in relation to certain stimuli. That I find enjoyable because I did take some courses in psychology, so that kind of thing does interest me a little bit. Um, the more difficult part for me to write is it's not necessarily description, but blocking in describing where things are in relation to to the perspective character, whomever that is, without going into the realm of like hand holding, because like like no reader wants that, no writer wants that, no writer wants to put that level of details. Like okay, like yes, you need to know that there's a spear on the wall. You don't necessarily need to know it's on the left wall, or maybe you do, but you don't necessarily need to know how tall the wall is. Um, with the my more recent publication, what's been particularly difficult, and as a subsequently, I don't like doing, is the world itself is very very detached from our modern world in a couple of different ways. The one of which is um, due to some things that had happened in about 100,000 years ago. Um, Nobody knows what the sun is, the moon, or the stars, and so as a result, a lot of language gets lost.
Okay.
And so I'm having to try to describe things in such a way that the POV character would know.
Yeah.
Um, and as a result, there's no sun, there's no stars, no moon, so there's a lot of lack of light.
Yeah.
So if you're out in the middle of the dark, not to mention like you would never do that, or these characters would never go out in the middle of the night without a torch. Um, it's again like describing what is considered too much, what is considered not enough, um, because you're talking about like a world that it's in itself, in and of itself, is physically dark.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have to say that really sounds like the kind of story I absolutely go nuts for. So, I might just check it out at some point after this interview. Now, if I recall correctly, and I have no reason to think that's not the case, we both met on the Indie Author Spotlight community on
Yep.
Discord. So I'll assume that makes you an indie author as well.
I
Did you always intend to go indie, or did you also consider maybe maybe appealing to some of the appealing to uh, a broader publishing company?
so fun fact. So I'm trying to think. I think when I first started self-publishing, it was probably about like 2013, I think. And again, I didn't know all the details because a lot of the information was not as widely spread um, about publishing. So I had gone through, at that point in time, I did not know this, a vanity publisher whose name I will not mention for the sake of possibly not getting sued. Um, so, again, I thought that was the publishing process. You went through the press and, yada, yada, yada. So I did not understand the full publishing process at that time. I was about 20, 20 years old. And again, at that time, social media wasn't as big as it was now. I mean, it was still pretty big, but indie publishing also was not that big either at the time. Um, my novel that I've talked about that's more like urban fantasy. I actually did get that. I didn't get accepted in a big publishing house. I did get accepted at a smaller press. Um, but after thinking about it and the type of story that it is and the length that I am expecting it to be, I don't think, or I did not think that it would serve well um, in a publishing house. I didn't think it would be able to sell well with the publishing house. I mean, it may have. I don't know. It's still a gamble. It could have been with a little bit more marketing, maybe, um, but like as a result, with a story that is as long as I was anticipating, and I'm still anticipating it to be, um, I did not think the traditional space is where it should go. So I went into took that. I It was offered. I declined, and then like took it into like self publishing down the rabbit holes where more or less it should have gone from Amazon KDP to Draft to Digital to Ingram Spark. And so I'll typically use one of those three aggregates in some way, shape, or form. Um, so I've considered it, but at this point in time, I don't think I want to go into the traditional space anymore. Um, Seems a lot more stressful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fair point. And given you've said that you gathered experience both with, both with indie and with more traditional publishing options, I'm sure you've had, maybe some expectations about, about how that would go, or about how each of them would go. Uh, did your experiences confirm that any of your previous expectations were actually correct?
Well, I think the only thing that is 100% certain in this life is death and taxes. So, as with like many things, like that we do, they're the choices that we make, um, and they have certain outcomes. So, my expectation is, generally speaking, to have no expectations. So, many of my books, I don't expect them to go off anytime soon. I don't expect a large readership, um, for the sole purpose to not open up the door to be disappointed. Um, but as far as um, work caseload, the work that I've done for while doing indie is about as much as I had expected to do. Um, that being said, to actually make something a little more successful, it requires a lot more time and a lot more effort than I actually have because I work quite a lot too. Um, just on the day to day job, and I kind of like my job. So, um, could there be a time where I might not need my day job and can just go ahead and go? It's like, oh, okay, I'll write books for a living. Um, sure, but as of right now, my expectations that's not going to change anytime soon.
Okay, fair enough. That is. that is something I actually find myself facing as well. But I'm not going to go into that right now because this video, this interview is about you. So moving ahead, um, now you've already talked about a little bit about how about how your audience or your prospective audience, your test audiences, some might say, have responded to some parts, some extracts of your work. What are the ways in which you uh, what are the ways in which you received that feedback, or were any of the or were any of the additional factors that that went into building your audience or establishing that connection with prospective readers? Uh, how was that like for you? How was that taking those first steps for you? Did they have any kind of, say, teachable moment, so to speak?
Well, I think if you're in the tradition, well, really in the arts anyway, like you should have some level of thick skin. And so I did some door to door sales work for for quite a while. So I think I do have a good amount of thick skin, um, and I did okay with that. But I stopped the moment that somebody pulled a gun on me. I was like, um, yeah, I'm not willing to get shot for a $40 commission check. Thank you. Um, but as far as in the way that I've received the constructive criticism, um, I have I do have like a writing partner. We go like back to back, like every, um, he's a lot more busier now, but like typically we would meet on Saturdays and go over our manuscripts. But in terms of else do I receive the feedback is, I do go and read my book reviews, and some have good things to say, some have not so good things to say. Someone has accused me of using AI, and today I think that's the only review I've ever like responded to, and it's just like, no, no, I do not use AI in this book, and I'll leave it at that. But I generally do not respond to reviews. That being said, some of the bad ones are the ones who have constantly criticized them. But that is kind of like where I've gotten a lot of my feedback. So, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I should not have included this scene because it added more confusion than was necessary. And then you're asking, yo, you put this thing in here and you ended the book without coming back to it. Why would you do that? Um, and and I was just like, take that in stride. So again, I don't respond to book reviews because you should never ever do that. Um, Again, unless I'm trying to save my like reputation. Say, hey, no, no, I don't use AI. Um, Never. I do not use AI in my writing, and as far as I can tell, my book cover designers do not use AI in their designing of the books. Um, but yeah, that's generally where I'll get most of my feedback, positive or negative. Um,
Yeah,
if it's one person who says it, okay, they hate you. All right, but if it's two people say, okay, maybe you should listen to them.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, uh, as a neurodivergent author, I have seen at least one of my pieces and get included on on a list of works written by AI, even though I know it's not written by AI. I wrote it myself, but you know, people sometimes have. I I find that people sometimes have issues
Yeah.
differentiating that. Uh, Beyond that, now, do any of your family or close friends know that you have this enterprise within the within writing? And if the answer is yes, what do they think? How do they react to that?
Um, yeah, so they'll like react to. I mean, I'll get most of the support from my grandmother, but it's like, oh, this is an interesting part of the character and like who you are. Um, cool. It's great that you write books. Tell me about it. It's like, okay, have a nice day. And it'll just like talk, like me talking about the book and whatnot. And only like a handful of people have actually like expressed an interest in actually picking up the book, picking up my book. So, I've gotten a couple of my friends to read some of my stuff, and one of them was like, they read the manuscript of my tome. I think it was about like 280,000 words. I think this is not published yet. Where they basically said, so I read the whole thing and it took me 6 months to read, not because it wasn't good, but because I got so depressed that I had to pray and fast every time I went to your book. And so
Honestly,
I've gotten some support
yeah.
in that way, like over the years, but nothing more like direct. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Uh, if slash when you ever decide to actually publish that book, put that quote right on the cover, or like somewhere on the like in the like on the inside that this person, that one of the readers had to like spiritually cleanse themselves in order to get into that. That's seriously
Spiritual
awesome.
cleanse themselves before they.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know, I, I'm pretty sure they'd have the same thought if they read this novella that's coming out in May, or would have been come out in May too. So maybe I'll put that in some marketing materials. It'd be great. It's like may require some spiritual cleansing to enjoy this book.
Yeah. It's basically a fancy content warning, so I'm sure the
Yeah.
right audience will very much like that. Now,
Yeah.
we've been talking a lot about how your experience changed from from your from project to project, more or less. So, uh, how would you describe your I would say your uh, learning curve over the course of over the course of your career so far, when it comes to your releases, and when it comes to how to I don't know, market them or schedule them and stuff like that.
Mm. My learning comes through a lot of trial and error, and it's very expensive. So I don't necessarily recommend people do that unless you have a good living situation or you have a very very good paying job. Um, so the novellas that I've odds are actually oddly enough, like somebody somewhere keeps buying one of specifically one book of mine. I don't know why, but I was like, oh, I got a royalty check for like 30 cents. It's like, really? I haven't been doing anything to market anything. Like, who's finding my stuff? um, so it was just like, yeah, like it's one of the novellas in the Dawn of Forest Black called like the Ranger's Dilemma that someone somewhere keeps finding, and I don't know how, but maybe it got like ads running somewhere that I don't know about. Um, like it has been a lot of learning. Obviously, when I again started in like 2012, 2013 with the Vanity Press, I thought that was it. And, like, again, I knew nothing. Um, and so progressing into like 2015, 2016, 17, I started learning a lot more. I was like, okay, well, like these are more or less how you should do ads, where about like you should place them. Facebook ads work, Twitter ads do not. Um, Amazon as it works if you can figure it out. Though oddly enough, I did do one successful Amazon ad campaign, but I forgot what I did, so I couldn't replicate it. So I was like, all right, it was just like putting like a bunch of like random stuff in it. I lost the data, I was like, well, it would be nice if I could replicate that again because that worked. That actually like netted me about $100. Which when you're talking about like giants like Brandon Sanderson, it's just like, oh yeah, like nothing. But in the indie space, that's like an accomplishment right there.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like if you do it once, like, yes, I did it. You got that excellent dopamine shot. Um, and so like now the learning curve tends to steer away from trying to figure and understand what has changed. Um, because traditional publishing, it doesn't change that often. It's basically been the same model since like the 80s. But with self-publishing, that constantly changes. Um, Partially because you kind of have Brandon Sanderson who does stuff, and it kind of like messes algorithms up too. Um, so it's like, like you put your stuff out and he happens to publish something. Like if you're writing a fantasy book, you publish a fantasy book, and
Yeah.
it happens to be on the weekend that he has released a book, which again, is bound to happen because of how fast he puts stuff out. You're like, oh, it's like, man, this is great. I've got some book reviewers lined up, and then he drops Stormlight Archives. Well, great. That was not. I did not anticipate that happening, and as a result, your release gets botched
Yeah.
um, because of that. Unfortunately, because you only have that. Uh, I think it's a 90-day window. 90-day window when it's considered new, where Amazon will generally prioritize the new stuff. But again, if you release it along with like Brandon Sanderson, it's the same genre. You, that's what's going to get shown.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. The 90-day rules that no longer applies. Um, and it's like little things like that, trying to figure out what's changed. That is that's always going to be the challenge because you need to figure out like who knows this stuff, and then you need to figure out like okay, where they're getting their information from. Like there is one YouTuber I occasionally go to, more specifically for Facebook ads, because he doesn't think anything else works, and it seems to work for him. And so he'll basically dissect Facebook's ad campaign and the changes to their dashboard and whatnot, and try to make it work. Um, Experiences vary, right?
Yeah.
He does a very different genre too. So, but you know, he seems to know what he's talking about. So I'm trusting that he knows what he's talking about.
I-
Um,
Is it Jed Hearn?
it's like David Botron or something like that.
Okay, I don't know him.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know the name of the person that you just name dropped either, but yeah, he does more historical fiction. Um, Again, like a very different audience.
Okay.
Um, though you could get away if you're writing some like Arthurian fiction, which is technically historical fiction.
Yeah, technically.
But
The best kind.
yeah, technically, did he exist? Historians don't know.
Well, last I checked, the consensus on Arthur was that he was actually, or rather that the figure of Arthur was based on some kind of Welsh figure who resisted who resisted Saxon expansion within Wales. Um, and then it's
Yeah,
somewhat funny that the descendants of the Saxons kind of co-opted him into becoming their national mascot, so to speak.
yeah. So I've heard that. Um, I've also heard that it was like he was a Roman, um, and he was just like leading people out of like the Roman Empire, and then essentially became the mascot because that the conflict with the Welsh was something that had happened, and he was involved in that. So
Yeah.
I think he was a real person. There seems to be plenty of historical evidence to suggest that he was. Like, was his name actually Arthur? Maybe not. This is probably closer to Artorius, maybe. But again, if he was strictly Roman, if he was Welsh, I don't know what his name would have been.
Yeah.
I don't know my Welsh names that well.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on the end, but I do have a few more things to address before that. First among these being, of all the questions that I've asked you, is there any you'd want me to answer?
Let's see. Well, so you see, normally I'd have like a very sarcastic question, but my sense of humor is almost always driven towards like American, so it might not necessarily make sense to anyone who's not. But
Hit me.
okay, all right, okay. So, how do you feel about the existence of the Infernal Revenue Service?
Nice little trick of the trick of language
Yeah,
there, calling it infernal rather than
yeah,
internal. And to that I say,
yeah.
hey, they caught Al Capone. So as far as I'm concerned, they're in the right. Like 9 times out of 10, I side with them when it comes to that. Also, also when it comes to that particular service, there are a few things that I would like to, that I would like it to address, but currently the political will doesn't exist, and that's all I'm gonna say about that because we already talked about
Yeah.
politics. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
so we got the sarcastic
yeah.
American question out of the way. Now I think you wanted to also ask a serious one.
No, like as far as like a more serious one, is generally speaking, because obviously we're talking about books. That's kind of like what we're here for. So do you generally find yourself gravitated towards morally gray um, or even morally contemptible characters in your fiction?
That's a that's an interesting question, and the answer is I am I'm gravitating towards well-written characters. Their morality is maybe not entirely secondary, but but if you can write them well, then that can be then their morality can become a somewhat something of a something of a secondary concern. Like if you're able to make a compelling story about any kind of character, it is likely that I will be compelled by it to
Mm,
some degree. Admittedly, if that character holds a position that that I don't agree with for whatever reason, there still ought to be some kind of justification in the text for the character to hold that position, for me to find that character, for me to find that character interesting, or to be able to connect to that character. Beyond that, however, um, uh, it would actually be interesting to write a character who is morally light gray, like how a lot of people imagine antiheroes. They do bad things for the for the right reasons, and
mm,
there is actually plenty of wiggle room when it comes to that, like the difference between legality and the difference between what is legally correct and what is morally correct, because these things are supposed to overlap, but but they
they
don't
don't.
really. So, in a way that that idea of the interplay, and maybe that even goes into such situations of individuals versus society, where you have where you have a broad consensus on what the right thing that ought to be done is, and then you have this one individual who stands who stands against that for whatever reason. And sometimes you might think that you might think that particular individual is corrupted, but what if the rest of society is actually corrupted and that individual is correct? Or or what is it that brings these parties in the positions that they hold? That is something I find uh, that is something I find particularly interesting to observe. How it is that these characters find themselves within their particular networks, and how their influences push them towards the places where they find themselves within these within these networks, within these societies. It's basically so yeah. I basically said that I want books that talk about politics without talking about politics.
Yeah.
Taking that moral
Um,
substrate and emphasizing that,
right.
and then
Well,
using it to bring. to bring forth some some contradictions that manifest in, among other ways, politics.
Mm, yeah. No. I mean, I think. I mean, I don't think all books are politics, but I think they have a there's kind of just like an internal mechanization like within them to talk about broader issues as a whole. So I also tend to like. I mean, I like well-crafted characters too, but like the world where the bad guy could be the big scary government in some way, shape, or form, and how does that manifest in some way? um, a more recent, it's a light series novels that I've started reading called 86, which is like that, which I would describe as like a dystopian version of the Holocaust, um, because you have these concentration camps, so to speak. They have to do things to gain freedom, and when they're about to get their freedom, they get shot. Um, and so you have like the someone who is supposed to be the moral compass, if you will, between right and wrong, who is also on the side, who is working on the side of the big bad, so to speak. And I really like she's having the conversation with her uncle, who is talking about these people as being less than human or more than human and whatnot. You have that full conversation just to identify like what classifies as a human is, and therefore being able to remove certain inalienable rights from groups of people. And then one of the things that he had mentioned was hope and despair are two sides of the same coin. Um, and I think a lot of characters I tend to really gravitate towards people who are, I guess, on the evil side of the spectrum, if I can use that word very loosely, but are still struggling with it. They're like, I I know this is wrong. I'm going to do it anyway, but I still feel bad about it. um,
You're basically talking about the, if I can use a, if I can use a, in a Song of Ice and Fire reference, it's kind of like the difference between Euron Greyjoy and Victarion Greyjoy, if you know who these characters are.
you're on. I can never remember their names. um,
Have you?
Euron Greyjoy was that the guy that was adopted into the Stark
No,
family?
no, that was Fionn. Uh,
Okay,
assuming you read the books, have you?
I have not. In fact, I will not pick those books up until I know beyond a reasonable doubt that it will get finished.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
then I suggest you pick up the. Then I suggest you go through the wiki to to get my point. Well, okay, I can give it here for short. Euron is basically like a wild cult leader who who might know that he's doing evil, but he doesn't really care. All he wants is power, and he wants power in particularly like weird, abstract, fantastical ways. And in order to
Mm,
do so, he's willing to go to some very weird and very disturbing lengths to do so. Victarion is his younger brother, and he is somewhat of a dumbass, but he is also more like more like an archetypical warrior. Like he is, like his, the main focus of his society is about being the biggest and strongest and being able to utilize that, able to utilize that in order
mm,
to gain glory for for yourself and for the people around you, for the people behind you. And he may do things that are evil, and he may consider some of his actions as being evil, but in the back of his mind, he still has that, that particular level of justification that he is nevertheless still, that this still brings some good to, to those that, to those that depend on him, to those he's connected to.
mm. Yeah. It. Well, I think Martin did a very good job. Again, I watched the series. I did not read the books. Again, I'm not going to read it until I know it's going to get finished. And I only hold him to this standard because he's still alive. Um, like, okay, like the guy died. All right, I can. All right, I'll still read it. Like I know it's not. I'm not going to get to the end, but like I'll still read it because everybody else is talking about it, and it might be something that I'm interested in. But for this one, it's like no, or I mean the thing with like Robert Jordan died. Did that stop him? He finished the Wheel of Time. No, and like all like joking aside, but I do think that George R. R. Martin did a very good job at like capturing all the different shades of gray that people tend to have. So like I mean, I don't think you really have a quintessential good person. Ned Stark was probably like the closest to it. I mean, he still had some things, but not that many.
Yeah.
You know, he was probably the most actually relatable character. But like the emotions were real. You know, everybody loved the fact that I'm presuming this he was a teenager at the time died. It was one of the Lannister, like the Lannister kids. I'm forgetting the guy's name. I'm forgetting the character's name. That's like he died at presumably a wedding banquet, and then everybody was happy. Um,
Yeah, that was Joffrey. That was his own wedding.
oh yeah, that was a yeah, and everyone was happy. Sure it was sad for a couple of people, but for all intents and purposes, it was a very joyful wedding for most everyone else involved.
Yeah. Okay. Now, final question before we close out. Is there any link or any platform that you'd like to shout out? So either anything you want to shout out, or that you think will help people in finding you or finding your work.
Um, Actually, I'm pretty sure I do have like links on my Twitter account, and I think that tends to be where I'm most active. And so that is sarcastic underscore elf.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned that that YouTuber who were you who you're following for was giving you Facebook recommendations for, or rather Facebook algorithm recommendations. So do you want to shout him out too, or?
Let me see if I can find him real quick. I'm sure I can. Probably doesn't need that extra shout out, but I'm sure he would appreciate it. David Galgrun.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
And well, I can say I'm done on my end. So unless you have any closing thoughts, then I can say I think we can close the interview.
No, I have no final thoughts. Just make sure to get your daily dosage of sushi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking part, and thank you to everyone who's been has been watching this video. If you've been enjoying yourselves watching this, well then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. If there is anything you'd like to add about anything that you've heard now, that is what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe, and ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My books, the first of my own Heir to the Empire series, The Next Generation and A Path Not Taken, are available at various book retailers under their respective master links in the description down below. Right past my social media links, which I also suggest you check out should you choose to. And given I am currently trying to get a third book published, by the time this video comes out, I might just have some updates on that. So after you're done seeing this video, it might be a good time to actually check out those social media links. Additionally, I also have a second YouTube channel where I talk about whatever crosses my mind, that will typically still be related to narrative analyses, but of works outside the print medium. So if that sounds like it could be up your alley, then go ahead and check it out. If ever you want to hear more about my thoughts on the print medium, maybe occasionally discussing it with other people as well, well then I suggest you stay on this channel and go through my extensive backlog, where aside from an embarrassment of riches when it comes to book reviews, I also do author interviews, book rewriting videos, writing advice videos, and other videos on miscellaneous connected topics. If none of that sparks your interest, then I suggest you go ahead and do whatever you want the rest of your day because it is your day after all. And yeah, that was it from me and from my guest, I assume. So until next time, I'm Jonathan Taylor. This has been Armanis Ar-Feinial, the sarcastic elf, and this has been the Heir's Lair.